Go ahead.
Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, friends, wherever you are from all over the world. I would like to welcome everyone to today's roundtable discussion on men at work, making work a better place. My name is Tola Deyoshu, and I am your host today. I'm also, or the moderator, I guess, I'm also an assistant secretary at Voice of Men 360, and for a living, I am a registered social worker. It is my great pleasure to host today's roundtable discussion. Thank you, Voice of Men 360 and the team for this opportunity. So we do hold these roundtable discussions to create awareness on topics such as this, men at work and how it is, with the hopes of sharing valuable information with our community as we believe will be useful in some ways. Before I introduce our special guest today, I want to give you a brief introduction about Voice of Men. Voice of Men 360 is a nonprofit organization founded in 2020 and is based in Toronto, Canada. Voice of Men 360 was born out of seeing the tremendous needs of boys and men in the society. So Voice of Men stepped up to support and help them in many areas of their lives, including, that's why we're doing a show like today, to talk about work and men at work and how that looks like. So we are part of International Men's Day, which is a global organization. International Men's Day is based on 6 pillars, which is about the overall well-being of boys and men. It has been around for 21 years and celebrated in 90 countries. These countries join together to do various activities on a regular basis. As mentioned earlier, today's roundtable discussion is men at work, and our special guests are the following. So I'm just going to introduce them. It's not in order of how they may appear on your screen, but just as I prepared it here. So we have Stephen Doris, who's the co-founder of Men Talk. Stephen is a truck driver, a survivor of suicide, a part of Canada's Suicide Prevention Service and CMHA's, so the Canadian Mental Health Association. He's also part of that. He's used to helping employees with their labor rights. I believe that that is not what he's currently doing, but that is what he used to do. He has been speaking tirelessly about men's issues on many platforms, and he is welcome here today. Thank you, Stephen, for joining us. If you'd like to say hello, so people know who you are. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, I thought I unmuted myself. Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Like Tulu says, I'm a former truck driver. I'm retired now, so that's why there's changes in my life. So changes in my status. That's about it. But I'm so happy to be part of this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that as well. And then next up, we have Sharmila Sataram. Sorry if I butchered your name. Sharmila is a certified human resources leader who works in the water and wastewater industry as a human resources consultant. She has led programs in environmental compliance, occupational health and safety, and human resources. She is a graduate of Queen's University and the University of Waterloo. She currently serves on Amnesty International's Global Assembly Preparatory Committee and is the sitting past chair of the National Board of Directors for Equal Voice, a multi-partisan organization working to promote and elect women in politics. Welcome, Sharmila.
Welcome. Thank you so much. Looking forward to this morning.
Thank you for being a part of this roundtable discussion. Up next, we have Sue-Ann Pacheco. I'm sorry. I know I asked you how to pronounce your name earlier. I am sorry if I butchered it. Perhaps when you say hello, you can correct that. She is an author. She's the founder of Epoch Effect, and she's also a marketing professional. Sue-Ann, so like I mentioned, she is all of those things. She's also, so Epoch Effect is an organization focused on uplifting marginalized Black, Indigenous people of color, women, and children to achieve their goals and dreams. She also has 15 plus years as an experienced marketing professional with several technology companies. Thank you, Sue-Ann. Sorry.
That's okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm looking forward to today's discussion. Thank you. And yes, you did say it fairly well, so you're good.
Okay. I was trying to keep all that in my head, so I do appreciate that feedback. And last but not least, maybe it's all because he's the only one that's not in Canada, we have Steve Whitten. He's from London, UK, all the way from UK. Thank you for joining us. I do believe it's the afternoon for you, not morning. So good afternoon. I'm not quite sure what other greetings to say there. Is it top of the morning to you? I don't know. Sorry about that, but welcome today. So he's the founder of Men Able. So he actually received a bachelor's degree, but then he decided to join the automotive sector as a car salesperson. From there, he's had numerous positions in the industry. He is renowned for a very insightful, pragmatic, and expert knowledge of the sector, automotive sector. His programs, facilitation, and approaches inspired thousands of people and audiences across the globe. But behind the showman, the confident, the facade was a host of mental health issues, and it was made up from childhood trauma, suppressed and repressed thoughts, and the fear of revealing his true self. But in 2020, he decided to open up to his family and decided to reach out to people in the automotive industry about mental health issues, therefore birthing Man Able. So I welcome Steve. How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. And yeah, thanks for that lovely intro. And yeah, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. And as you say, from what is a very unusual sunny England today.
Oh, yeah, I think we switched weather with you because it's raining out here and it's kind of a bit miserable. I don't know how it is in Cornwall though. How is it, Stephen?
It's snowing here right now.
Snow, see? So I guess we definitely switched the weather. Mind you, we're in the middle of winter, so I guess we shouldn't complain. So thank you everybody for joining us today. So we truly appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedules to have this discussion about men in the workplace. We are Voice of Men 360, and we decided to host this because of the 2021 International Men's Day theme, which is creating a safe environment. And I believe that is about organizations, institutions, to create a safe environment for men. So it's creating a safe and protective environment for men in all nations. The safe environment also means ensuring there is intervention and mediation where necessary. A safe environment is essential for nurturing, growth, and development of men who are stable, healthy, and caring. So this is the reason why we are having this discussion today. And I think given the pandemic and the effect, we hear it all the time in the news of what it's had on people's mental health and well-being, and also just people losing their jobs and having to maybe reinvent themselves. I think this is actually a very timely topic. So thank you everybody once again. So I do have some questions for everybody. I don't know if you guys want me to pick people to ask and then other people can go after that, or do you guys just want to, whoever feels like they can answer the question best or first can just answer? It's up to you guys.
You just picked.
I just pick? Okay, perfect. Okay, so as management, HR, or a respected leader in the workplace, what are the common challenges you see among your male employees or colleagues in the workplace? So you know what? Why don't I start with Sharmila, because she is HR, and then we can go from there. Other people can jump in.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. Some common challenges. I'm going to tackle this on two fronts. One will just be, where are men in the workplace? What types of fields are they in? So I work in the water wastewater industry, and we're predominantly men. So we're actually looking to diversify who's in our workplace so that it's reflective of the communities that we serve in. But there are some sectors that I would like to see an increase in men, and where they could really have a strong impact in the community. And that would be in the healthcare sector and in education. And that is desperately needed when we look at elementary schools and being able to have role models for children that are men and that also look like them. And I just want to raise that. I know it's not exactly the question, but I want to raise that about what are some of the challenges. If we're looking for an inclusive and belonging society, we do want that to be reflective of the communities that we serve in. And because I'm here based in Peel, Mississauga, you know, we have about 160 different ethnicities, 121 different languages, and we're so rich in that diversity, and that needs to be reflected in the workplace. And the second piece, just because we're talking about this piece around caring and some of our guests are on mental health, is how do we see men expressing any challenges that they may have with their mental health and recognizing that and acknowledging it? Or likewise, during the pandemic, being able to access childcare or elder care and leave and taking on some of those responsibilities, and being aware of what workplace policies exist for them to take advantage of, and being able to ask those questions. So those, maybe just to start off, is some things that I would like to share. And I know that my co-panelists are going to be building on this, and we'll be building on it throughout the session.
So if I may add to what
Mhm.
Sharmila had opened up with. So for myself, from my experience, she talked about men in education. And so I'm from the Caribbean and we moved here. And in growing up through the school system here, I've only had 2 male teachers who were of color. And that made a huge difference for me because I never realized that there could be teachers of color within the educational system. So that's number one. The other part she had touched on was seeing them in other areas as well and how they express themselves when it comes to their mental health. I feel that the way that we've been conditioned as both young boys and young women, women are encouraged to talk about how they feel, whereas boys, for me growing up, were not always encouraged to speak what they truly felt. And so making that connection between how they feel as opposed to suppressing those feelings, I feel is difficult for some men, not all, but for some men. And I've had the experience of working with a colleague who was going through some very difficult emotional times. And this was correlated to his upbringing. And I remember he had sent me a text, and the text alarmed me to the point where I had to call the police because I really thought he was going to take his life. It scared me to the point where I had to call the police. And at that time he had moved. So I wasn't even sure where he was because I hadn't been to his new place yet. But the long story short is because of his reaction to losing his job, the way he had reacted, it scared me. And I thought, oh my gosh, he is really going to take his life at this moment because, he has a young family, and the thought of him not being around for his 2 sons, even that was like, oh, like this can't happen. So in the end, the police did find him. They got him safely at home. And the police called me back and said, thank you. And I said, for what? And he says, because not everybody gets involved in situations like this. So to your point, Sharmila, they're not encouraged to talk about their feelings. And as a result, they don't know where to go and what outlets they have in which to speak about how they feel.
Thank you, Sue-Ann. I actually think I'm going to get Stephen to jump in first. I know, Steve, you unmuted your mic. Maybe you should say something, but I know Stephen has something to talk about when it comes to work and how he felt and just being overburdened, to kind of piggyback off of what you just said. But Steve, you already unmuted your mic, so I'll let you talk, and then we'll let Stephen say, maybe add to what the 2 ladies had said earlier.
You're up, Steve.
Is it me or Stephen?
Well, I was going to say Stephen, but I realized you unmuted your mic, so I wanted to let you say it before you lose your thought about what you were going to say.
No, that's cool. No, I mean, I speak predominantly about the automotive industry, and that also then has resonance for any industry that is performance oriented and very male dominated. And the biggest issue that I see for male employees in that arena is the pressure to be competitive, to be quite strong. There is still very much a kind of a legacy of be strong or be gone kind of attitude amongst management. And, it's because it's a diagnostic business as well. The business is all about diagnosing and sorting out and fixing somebody's transportation needs. And at the same time, when that car or van or truck breaks down, that we then have a whole team of people who diagnose what's wrong with it and fix it. Put all of those together, and what we have is this kind of fix it culture and a fix it mentality. And typically it's becoming fairly evident that I think that somebody just said about, women are quite open to talking about stuff. Men are far more reluctant, because men's typical kind of default position is, if it can't be fixed, why talk about it? And so in an environment that is all about diagnosing and fixing stuff, what's happened, and what I see a lot, is that management try to apply the same kind of approach. And what it actually does is it causes guys in particular to repress and suppress their feelings, their thoughts, because the last thing you want to do is to declare anything that may be seen as a weakness, or that makes you seem, different, or, not fitting in, or not able to do the job.
Thank you, Steve. So Stephen, do you want to add anything to that?
I'm just taken back by everything that's being said right now, because a lot of it is resonating with what's gone on for me around my working career. Men, as we've been said here, don't usually talk, but if you get men together without the female around, you're going to find men are more than willing to talk about their problems, but they have to feel that they're in a safe environment. And it's something we have to do, is create that safe environment that they could come forward and say, okay, look, I'm not having a good day. But to do that in the workplace in front of everyone, it's not going to happen. So we have to have something going on in the work industry where a man could go to a peer and just say, listen, I'm having one of those days today. I just, I'm ready to bawl my eyes out, or whatever the case is. But we have to make that safe environment for them. And for myself, what we're doing in Cornwall with the Men Talk, and that's what we offer, a safe place to be themselves. And this kind of gets to me, but it's what has to be done. And I sound like a broken record, but let's make it safe for men.
Thank you. So I'm just going to piggyback off of everybody. I have a private practice, and so I see men in my practice where they are coming about marriage issues. They're coming about workplace issues. They're coming to me about raising, parenting issues. And so I think, and I'm telling you, I'm actually noticing more than before. And so I do believe something's working. It's starting to work, right? People opening up these things like Bell Let's Talk Day, or just our workplaces. And I think with the pandemic and everything too, it's just telling everybody it's okay to struggle. And so I am noticing that people are slowly trying to seek help. But is it too little, too late? Is it enough? And is there still a stigma? These are the questions that I have about this.
I think it's generational also. You take someone from my generation who I was born in the 40s. So, I was brought up, and I'm going to say Steve from his generation also, we were taught not to talk. If I went home, if my sister went home with a cut on her leg, she was okay. Oh, poor baby, sit down. I'm going to fix you. I'm going to fix you. And, she'd sit there, cry her tears, get her cup of tea, whatever. If I come home, it was like, here's a patch, get out and stop crying. And so there's still a lot of people of my generation around. So we're still not able to talk as freely as, I'm going to go back to just my son, who is 42 years old this year, and yet he comes to me and talks about problems. So I think it's changing, like you said, but it's going to take a lot of time to change the mentality that we are allowed to cry and we are allowed to feel bad. It's not just a woman's privilege. It's everybody's privilege not to feel good.
That's right. Does anybody else want to add to that, or should I just move on to our next question? Okay, so I'll move on, because actually speaking about that, I think what Stephen was alluding to was maybe more of that toxic masculinity. So let's talk about toxicity. So let's talk about the toxic work environment. So we often hear about that. Oh, are you raising your hand, Steve? Or you're saying, yeah.
I worked in an environment, not my last job, my job before last, before I retired. The manager we had ruled with an iron thumb. And everybody was afraid of him. Everybody, if he said you were fired, you were fired. There was no coming back. He'd tell my immediate supervisor, get rid of that particular driver, and that driver was gone within 2 days. and it was he run the environment, the work environment on fear. And because I never had fear of anyone, I used to get him every morning when he comes through the door. He would walk by straight as a needle and never look at anybody. Just as he would go into his office, I turn around and say, "Good morning, Scott, how are you?" And you could see him boil up. And my boss told me, he wants me to fire you. I said, "What for?" He says, "Because you bug him every morning." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to be bullied." So I just kept him going. And I started a movement to start a union in the company because of this particular boss. And what was really ticks me off to no end is instead of getting rid of him, who was the one that was subverting everybody, they promoted him. So what does that tell everybody? Do as he says, not that, you got to do it or you're at the door. So, and it just ticks me to no end, people like that.
Yes, if I can add to that as well. So I have an older brother. My older brother worked in the automotive industry as well for a very, very long time. They had brought in a new manager into his area that he worked in. He was in the R&D area. That individual, a male as well, made it so uncomfortable for everybody. They were on, eggshells all the time. He made it so intolerable that my brother ended up having to make the decision, although he didn't need to, but he felt that he needed to leave because it was just so intolerable. Because this individual was just making it impossible for people to feel comfortable and safe and get their job and work done. In that note as well, being in the industries that I've worked, I've also worked in toxic environments where some of the males were coming from a chauvinistic perspective, not respecting the ideas that were coming from their female counterparts. At the same time, we did have male managers who were making it uncomfortable to speak up and to really say what you truly felt and what you wanted to do and contribute to the conversation within the boardroom. And so for me, it's part of it is, why is this still persistent in terms of this need for male counterparts to feel that they have authority? And to demonstrate authority is to be loud and brash, and when that's not really leadership. Leadership is actually bringing people to the table, listening where they're coming from, and work towards a common solution. But that doesn't always seem to be the case, and it's still prevalent.
I think the bottom line is money. No company is going to get rid of a manager who is actually producing money. And where I was working, that was what was happening. The branch that I was in, that particular terminal was making money, where all the other ones were just barely getting by. So don't get rid of the person that's making money, but get rid of the ones in the other divisions that weren't making it and hiring people of the same coat. You get another man in another terminal. And
I hear you, but it turned out that this same manager who was causing grief for everybody, when they realized that they lost good people, they had to get rid of him because he was costing them money.
And if I could just say a few words on this topic, everybody, it doesn't matter what your role is in the organization, we are all employees. And so at the end of the day, everyone is expected to be contributing to a safe workplace. And if that's not happening, no one is above the law. I just want to say that, and I know that these practices are changing, and I'm sure that we may all have an experience that may be considered toxic. And we have to first be thinking about, how are we contributing to it? Could we be also allowing this by not speaking out and saying something, or not supporting a colleague who's coming forward? And so some of the things I wanted to just mention about toxic workplaces is that, it might look different. It might be more subtle than something overt. And so at first you might not realize, and it might take a couple of incidents before you're realizing that, okay, this behavior is not appropriate. And this is why it's really important that organizations set out what is that behavior that is appropriate, and that their leaders are modeling it. It is a leadership competency to be able to have emotional intelligence, to understand how to bring together a team, to understand this piece around mental health. And I mention this piece because 1 in 4 Canadians will have some sort of mental health condition before the time that they're 35, I believe is the stat. And so we need to understand this, embrace it, and break down the stigma. And we also need to understand that when we're in the workplace, we may make mistakes and we need to take responsibility. And it's not about the intention. You might say, well, I did not intend to insult someone, or I did not intend to hurt their feelings or say something inappropriate, but it's all about the impact. How did that impact somebody else in the workplace? What now is their experience? And so those are a few pieces that I wanted to add on this topic. And that, of course, it will look different in different environments. But we need to all be committed to working as safely as we can, to continually learning. As we know, words change, they evolve over time, and they have different meanings. Our attitudes have different, those evolve, as was mentioned by other speakers. And you may have beliefs, that you have at your home or wherever, and they may not be the same as the beliefs that we want in the workplace. And you do need to be able to adapt. And you will have that responsibility to do so, because that is the common expectations within the workplace. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, I would throw in as well that I think from what I'm seeing and where we're at with MenAble, when we created that, we decided early on that it's absolutely not a training company, it's not a development business, it's about culture, and it's about changing the culture from the very top. And we will only work with organizations where the CEO, the president, the top of the organization is fully on board and properly pledges and commits to what we want to try and achieve. And the reason for that, I think, as Stephen said, is that there are still in our industry too many men in particular who have been over promoted and underdeveloped. And I think it's because culturally what we've ended up doing is that we hire and we promote for confidence, not competence. So we don't look at the competence of individuals. It's about their confidence in an interview and in an environment where they can profess to be the best at the job and be the one that achieves the best results in whatever that looks like. And I think when I hear stories of the bullying that people have described, that for me is because these people have found themselves in positions where suddenly what kicks in is fear. And it's fear of being found out. It's imposter syndrome. It's fear of somebody realizing, oh, wow, I'm now in a position that's 1 or maybe 2 levels above where I feel comfortable. And of course, then what they revert to is learnt behaviors. And I think all of us of a certain age can remember a manager or people that we know about that managed in a particularly harsh way. And in the automotive industry, and particularly in car dealerships, it's almost become a bit of a badge of honor if you are a tough leader, if you are a harsh, hard taskmaster. And, to try and change that culture across many, many businesses is going to take time. And it's, I'm hearing stories even today of young salespeople who are, being sworn at and being told that they are described by a certain word that I won't use, but and things like that. And you think it's 2021, not 1981. Why are we still putting up with this? And we're putting up with it because it's from the very top, from the CEO. Those people are fixated on results, on the achievement of targets, the achievement of objectives, and everyone's under pressure. And you push that all the way down to the level where you've got managers who are operating from a position of fear and a position of ego, because that's the other thing that kicks in. We talk about ego meaning, oh, look at me, but actually ego means, the shield that we all carry to protect us. Our ego is the thing that protects us from the harsh words and thoughts that come our way. And so these managers create this kind of shield, and suddenly they're operating from ego and fear. And it's the people below them that are feeling the effect of that. And big generalization, because of course that's not everywhere, and it is changing. And of course in the automotive industry, we are seeing changes happening, but I think that's, that's how I would sum up what we've been talking about.
So Steve, a quick question for you. Why do you feel we still have defined roles for men and defined roles for women when it comes to the workplace?
Sorry, I'm not, in what respect? Sorry, I'm not quite with you.
So why specifically, like, okay, you mentioned the automotive industry. Is it still heavily male oriented, or are you seeing that shifting as opposed to the medical field where you have almost equal representation? But why do you feel that we still have specifically defined roles for men and women? And if we didn't have those defined roles for men and women in the workplace, would we have less mental stress?
Well, I mean, we have an organization in the UK that I'm working closely with called the Automotive 30% Club. And they have a very visionary leader who her goal is to get 30% of senior leaders in the automotive industry to be female by 2030. And, as a goal, and that's raising the awareness of gender balance and diversity and so on. And I think, my view on it is that for many, many years, what we've done is that we've actually suppressed the natural feminine side of men, and we've actually promoted the dysfunctional masculine side of men. And as a result, we've ended up with two extremes. And so by organically, we've almost created an environment in automotive, not just automotive, but many male dominated sectors, where men's behavior, men's attitudes, men's beliefs have almost created defined roles for themselves that have made it then very uncomfortable for women to get into those positions, and worse, for them to stay. And I think that's what we end up with now, is that we still see a lot of women coming into the automotive industry and they don't stick around for very long. And I think, as you may have said a little while ago, it's about some of those chauvinistic views, those kind of misogynistic attitudes, less and less so, because fortunately those, that's starting to drift away, and we're starting to get more progressive thinking coming through. But I think, we've still got a long way to go to kind of even that balance up.
Thank you, Steve. Does anybody else have anything to contribute to the toxic work environment? So, yep.
I was just going to say, not all we have to do, it sounds too simplified. What we have to do is, women have searched for equality, and the pendulum has swung. Women are getting more and more equality, are getting more and more of what they deserve. But I think we have to watch how the pendulum swings too far, and make it that men don't feel like they're being the one that are being put on the side instead. We have to make it that it's equal between the men and the women, that you are my equal, I am your equal. You're not above me, I'm not above you. And I think this is one of the problems that's starting. I'm in the trucking industry. I've been in the trucking industry 54 years. And when you see the first woman come in, they were beat down basically, and you wouldn't see them come back, like Steve was saying. Now you see women coming into the trucking industry, and the men are in. And I don't mean it physically, but they're embracing the women into the field, because we're realizing that they are our equals. And they're, they can drive a truck as well as I can drive a truck. And some of them actually done a lot better than I can. So we have to make women and men feel, not just in words, but in actual actions, that we are the same. We're equal. I can do your job, you can do my job. Maybe not technically, but what I'm trying to say on that is like, I'm no better than you, you're no better than me. And I think that's where we have to go.
Just to build on this piece, because this piece is very critical, that whenever a new population that is being underrepresented in the workplace starts to come in, there starts to be this toxic attitude that the person is not qualified, or that the majority population is somehow losing their jobs, or and this is and we see this, and I just want to build on that point, because yes, we need to make everyone feel inclusive and equal, and they are because the laws say so. Where we need to change it is on the societal aspect, the economic aspect. It's the mindset. And we need to also look at this from the cultural aspect. You know, we could look at this for men when we look at which kind of men were in the workplace as they immigrated, for example, into Canada, and the different barriers that they put up. So, and then, you know, when we think about then women, for example, entering into some of these male dominated spaces, then they need time to also be able to learn these skill sets because they did not have the exposure. So if we look at things here, like, you know, when we had different waves of immigrants coming in, when the Italians came in, how were they treated in the workplace? When Indians came in, how were they treated in the workplace? All still men, but all having different experiences. Oh, can they do this job? Do they know how to do it? And I just use those two examples, but there's many for each wave of new immigrants that come into the country and then come into our workforce. And so I think that's, you know, one of the pieces that we need to be collectively working against, to say, you know what, there are barriers here on a lot of different levels, and we have a role to break those things down and to make a better society, and that these are our legacies. And so instead, I like flipping the switch to say, how can we be proud? How can I take pride that I have helped someone who is not really represented in this workplace come in, get the skills, have the positive experience, and thrive? And then you get to be part of that person's success. You get to be part of their story. And I think these are some of the tools that we can use to help with these workplace conversations when we're saying, you know, we are going to be outreaching to populations that are not in our workplace presently, and that we're losing out on the benefit of that richness, that innovation into our workplace. So I just want to draw in some of those pieces of the conversation as well.
So if I can add to that as well, I was recently on a presentation at my current technology workplace, and we were talking about mentorship and sponsorship and how this impacts men and women. And one of the things that I found interesting that came out of that discussion was that when it came to mentorship and with women and men, not a problem. But when it came to sponsorship, there was an imbalance. Men were getting more sponsorship in terms of getting somebody who would recommend them for a particular role compared to women. So that imbalance still exists within certain companies. And so we have to be mindful, to the point that you're making, Sharmila, in terms of being proud about helping someone learn skills and move them up. But we also have to address it at those levels. So if you want men and women to break that glass ceiling, depending on the industry that they're in, then the sponsorship side, we need to really focus on that. And so if somebody's coming to the table with the skills and has demonstrated that they can lead a group of individuals and a team, then those recommendations, we need to really get behind those recommendations for women, and for men to accept the fact that, yes, they are comfortable with being led with women. But right now we're still dealing with all of that. And so it was surprising for me to hear that as well. So I'm not disagreeing with you, I'm agreeing with you. It's just there's so many levels within organizations that we're still seeing the disparity. And although we're working towards it.
And I know I've spoken now a couple of times on this topic, but I just want to add, because we are still technically in February, but this is not exclusive to February. But when we do look at men in the workplace, how many of these men in senior leadership roles, supervisory role, are Black? How many of these men are Indigenous? You know, and looking at where these leaders are they being promoted? Are they being sponsored? Exactly to Sue-Ann's point here. And so that's another element within men in work. Who are we seeing? Which voices of men are we seeing in positions of power and authority and influence? Mm-hmm. And, you know, what impact does that have in the rest of the workforce? What impact does that have in our families? And what impact does that have for our children, seeing who can be leaders where?
Thank you. So I feel like in this discussion, we went and talked about different things that could be kind of done in the workplace. What is being missed? How men can be the perpetrators, but also the victims of toxic workplace environment, and just how also we can, look at how people of color, Black, Indigenous, and people of color could include like men and could be sponsored to be promoted, to be seen and be highlighted in their organizations. So I want to thank everybody for contributing to that question. So, I mean, kind of just to go back to the toxic workplace environment, because I think I feel like everybody struggles with this, whether they are the perpetrator or the victim. But what can one do if they do find themselves in a toxic workplace environment? So what are the resources available? What would you say are the recommendations?
I think depending on how your HR operates, you can report directly to them. But it all depends on what position your manager holds also in the company. A lot of times you're going to go to HR, and I'm not going to say every industry because everybody is different, that your voice is not heard, or you're being dejected. I have a friend that wouldn't be heard because of all his complaints going up, and they were in writing and everything else. He ended up going to Workplace Canada or whatever it's called, from the government, and filing a complaint against the workplace itself. And what was ironic was the people at the Work Canada turned around and said, "Oh, this is about our 50th one we got in the last 6 months," and nobody's done nothing. So we have to, if we're going to be able to complain without repercussions, and this is what holds everybody back. You're going to go in, you're going to complain about your boss. If you're afraid to lose your job, my last 5 years of working, I didn't worry because I knew I could retire any day. So it was like I was stirring a pot, and I constantly stirred it. And at the end, I was asked, "Can you kindly leave?" And because they were going to start making things harder. But if you're going to be in a toxic environment and you want to stand up, you have to have people backing you up. You cannot do it alone. I forget who said it before. We have to have people behind us causing the movement to work. And regretfully, there's not everybody that has the gumption to stand up, or is not afraid to stand up because of losing their job and whatever. You can't. For me, like I say, I could stir the pot. I wasn't afraid. But there's a lot of people that were behind me that could not lose that paycheck. So zip it up. I don't know how it's going to change, but we have to start organizing people that they could go someplace and talk about it. Go to HR. And if you're not happy with HR, go higher or whatever. But if you got to go right to the top. But all these industries are and continue to be male dominated. And it's the old boys club or the good boys club, whatever it's called. And so like, you're doing good for me. I'm not going to wrap you on the knuckles, or I might tell you to watch it for the next 2 weeks or something like that. Then go back to your old moods. So, but we have to get a complete change and make people understand that they don't have all this power to bully and make the place toxic.
Steve, I see that you unmuted your mic. Thank you, Stephen. You want to contribute to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think the question for me is, what constitutes a toxic environment? Because it strikes me that it's rather subjective. And what I mean by that is that I've grown up in a very performance-driven, target-oriented, male-dominated environment, and there are elements of that I think are toxic and need to change and need to be different. But a few years ago, when I first started up my own business, I started doing some work in the UK, we call them councils or local authorities, kind of local municipal departments, whatever you call them in Canada. But I started doing some work in there, and the gender balance was the other way around. And I have to say, I was in there about half an hour and I thought, this place is toxic, because they're all excuse my lack the word, but they're all bitching about each other. They're all backbiting. They're all having a go about each other and talking about each other, you know, behind their back, and deciding who they're friends with and who they're not friends with. And, you know, this changes from one day to the next. And I thought, you know, that I thought the car industry was a toxic environment. And I go in there and I think, wow, I wouldn't want to work in there for very long. You know, but I suppose to answer the question, what do you do about it if you're in a toxic environment? It's a bit like Stephen said, you know, you've got to have the gumption to speak up. You know, you are as valuable as anybody else in an organization, regardless of level and seniority or whatever that is. And, you know, your opinion counts. And, you know, speak up, be heard, just say what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, you know. And we're actually just about to embark on some work around that for 16, 17-year-olds who are about to go into the workplace, because they're coming out of this very sort of bubble wrapped education environment, going, you know, dropped straight into the, as we say, out of the paddling pool and into the Atlantic, because they're just suddenly dropped in the deep end. And they need to, you know, we need to help them with some resilience and say, look, this is a very different environment to what that is. So I suppose for me, the question comes back to what constitutes a toxic environment.
Okay. Sharmila, I believe you probably could speak to that, because being HR and you having people come to you, you could probably tell us a bit more about what a toxic environment, different for different people that have come to you.
There's going to always be a definition of what a toxic environment is. And, you know, it's right what some of the panelists are saying, that it can be subjective. But first and foremost, you know, we do have the Human Rights Code. And so if it's on one of those prohibited grounds, that becomes, you know, a bit more clear. Like if it's something on sex, age, place of origin, you know, gender identity, we have a huge list that's there. And then you've got this piece around poisoned work environment, which those things may be like the way that somebody speaks to you. Are they belittling you? You know, are they screaming at you in the workplace? And all of these things need to be defined in a policy. And I'm sorry, normally, you know, I don't want to speak too much because it's on this element, it's usually defined per organization, but they are pretty standard. And you should be receiving that training. And if you're not getting that training, that might be a bit of a red flag, like, okay, because that's starting the norms for the organization. But what I wanted to focus on was, you know, acknowledge that, you know, if you're a new worker, it's going to be more challenging to bring forward and, you know, these observations and to share them. And what one of the other co-panelists has said about fear, you know, you may not be able to bring something forward, or you may not want to, because you may be concerned, like, will I lose my job? And it's really sad to hear these things. And I know it's a reality. And so here are some different ways that I think we can be working together in the workplace. First and foremost, when we're in a workplace, we spend a substantial amount of time there. And so we do form relationships, and there is social influence with our relationships. And by that, I mean, there's always someone who you're like, well, I want to hear their opinion. You know, what do they think about this? Or if you think about, oh, I need some advice on something, who might I go to? That's just an example of social influence. And if you have that with somebody that you're seeing is doing something that you deem to be inappropriate, like, you can use that and just have a conversation with them and try to go from peer to peer and find a way to have that conversation. Ideally, you'd call it out in the moment, but if you can't, having a conversation on the side. The other way to look at is the union. Are you in a unionized environment? And if you are, the union has a leadership role to play here in terms of helping us, and I say us like everybody in the workplace, to create an environment that's supportive and productive and healthy. And they have leadership training in these areas. And so that's also a source of advice that you can go to say, hey, I'm experiencing this in my workplace. How, you know, what advice can you give to me? What support can you provide me? And they can provide support. They may be able to come in and have a conversation with your manager. And that could remove a bit of that fear element. They may have relationships with that worker that needs to be spoken to, and maybe they can have that conversation. There's also the piece around HR. Yes, coming to HR, and we always take these matters seriously. At least I know for myself, and in our profession, we are regulated here in Canada. And, you know, I know that not everyone has had the same experience, but as we are producing new attitudes, new mindsets, new ways of working, redefining what our leadership competencies. I'm hoping that people will have a better workplace experience. And I know it does take time, but yes, certainly come to your HR. If you don't feel like you can go to your manager, or that they might not take action, you always have the ability to go to their manager, and their manager may be likely to take action. There's also a piece around some workplaces have what's called an employee and family assistance program, which is a confidential 24-hour program. Often here, it's, one of the providers may be Chappelle. You may be familiar with that name, but that's a service that some workplaces have that you can call and have free confidential advice. And it's not just on issues related to toxic work environment, but on a host of topics that may be relevant for your family, career transitions, speaking about maybe you need grief counseling, maybe you need someone to help you find childcare facilities, maybe you need some support around financial budgeting. This is a free service that are professionals and that you can outreach to. There's even counselors that you can speak to. You can also raise your concern and have someone speak to you and provide you with advice. There's also another way to work with this, and it could be to say, okay, I think our workplace, have we ever thought about doing training on this topic? And because we know that workers have more than one workplace experience, you can also leverage that to say, oh, we had a really neat training at this company that I think would be really neat if we could consider doing it. Then you're also presenting this in a bit of a positive way, and people's minds, if their minds are already not thinking about this in terms of a toxic workplace environment, it is another way that it might signal for them. So I just wanted to share some different ways that you could approach this. Not everything needs to be escalated to the manager or HR. Some things could be dealt with individual to individual, and some things are going to need to be escalated. There may be repeat behavior, or there could be one incident that is quite offensive that needs direct intervention. And I have been involved in these cases, helping to, one, identify that there has been an issue, two, validating that, yes, this is real and this did take place, and three, helping to repair and restore a workplace environment. So making sure that people can bring it forward, making sure that there is an opportunity for parties to understand each other and to acknowledge, that perhaps there was wrongdoing, and then a chance to repair those relationships. And so maybe I'll stop there in case others want to add some pieces.
So if I can quickly add, and it's on what Steve had said in terms of the environment that he was experiencing. I just feel that we need to get to a place where we stop comparing and judging each other, and that will alleviate a lot of the toxicity that we are feeling in the environments in which we're working. And this applies to both men and women as well. And if we can get to that place, and if our senior leaders can encourage that sort of environment, we're probably going to see less and less complaints regarding the workplace and the way we're being treated. So I think it really comes down to, if we can get rid of the judgments, as Sharmila was saying about ageism and sexism and all of that, gender identity and so forth, and just come together as individuals, as who we are, and the talents and the skills that we're bringing to the roles together, and we can find that cohesion in terms of working together, then we're probably going to see less complaints going forward. That's ideal. I realize that, I know, but I feel that's really where we need to start.
Thank you, Sue-Ann. Does anybody else want to add anything? Yes, hi, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with Sharmila and Sue-Ann. I think they're both absolutely spot on. And I think the crux of it is that we need to have the definition of, the standards and things that Sharmila was talking about. What I'm experiencing and what I've seen for 35 years I've been in the auto industry is that doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. And I even had a leader who said to me the other day that when they come on board with what we're doing, they want us to work with the HR department, because the HR department see themselves as hiring and firing only. That's it. They do not provide the pastoral care that Sharmila was talking about. And I sit here and I think, wow, that's a big job, because what you've got is people who are running the HR department who are saying, you know, we'll work with managers to make sure that all the boxes are ticked when they recruit somebody, and then at the other end when they need to get rid of somebody. And the bit in the middle is the once a year performance reviews. And so that's what I come back to in terms of the subjectivity around what is toxic, because, you know, I've always lent towards performance driven organizations, and where you're on targets, where you have objectives, and that seems to work fairly well for me. Somewhere that isn't quite so driven like that probably doesn't work quite so well for me, but that's also part of what I've grown up in and what I've been nurtured towards and so on. But the minute that I ended up with a manager that started bullying or being a bit, you know, over aggressive, you know, fortunately I've got the wherewithal to stand up for myself and deal with it. In reality, do I? What I actually probably do is take that home with me and, you know, get home and kick the dustbin around the garden and vent my anger in some other way. Because actually, as has already been said, I'm too fearful of losing my job to step forward and say to my manager, it's not acceptable for you to talk to me like that. You know, it's not acceptable for you to treat me in that way. And in an environment where, you know, like this guy said to me, the HR department are there for hiring and firing. I don't have an HR department that I can go to, you know, and in a non-unionized environment, I don't have a way of, I just go, well, what do I do? You know, and of course, what we're talking about now is now 2021, post-pandemic, we're all a lot more enlightened. We've all got a great vision of where we want to be. But what Stephen and I will be very aware of is that we're talking from a position of how we, you know, certainly how we saw this in 1985 when I first started work, you know, and very, very different. And we have come a long way, but we've still got a massive long way to go. And probably won't be in my lifetime.
And if I could just draw on what Steve is saying, sorry, because it's such a good point, like with HR, and that our responsibilities, like we should be seeing ourselves as business leaders. And this is where it's an interesting piece about what is being taught in the schools, you know, because obviously, like, you know, you go to school to learn these skills and experience to get a degree to then become a professional. And so that's also a place that we need to be starting. And I'm just thinking about like Steve's organization. It'd be good to be getting in at the level of what's being taught in the schools. And of course, even in HR, like we're not taking decisions. This is an interesting piece that people don't always realize. Like we provide advice. And so we also have power in terms of this social influence that I was speaking about as a worker. So when I'm working with my managers, you know, if I want to have some influence, I'm going to be using my relationship, right, to be able to have conversations that may be uncomfortable, to say, okay, well, you know, what about this? Have we thought about these options? You know, and helping people along in their leadership journey as well, because everyone has, you know, biases. For example, you may have heard the word unconscious bias. We have these, and they may not even be realizing how they're impacting our views or our perspectives or the action we're willing to take. And, you know, HR is also a field where, you know, it is driven with women internally, but when you come into the senior leadership roles, it's often men, and that you're sitting with at these leadership circles. And again, I agree that we still have further to go. And, you know, there's no kind of end goalpost. As our communities continue to evolve, as our society continues to evolve, you know, we are going to be more aware of different barriers and systems and attitudes that we have that we may not have been aware of yesterday, that now we are aware of because we've been able to make some progress and remove some of them. So this is where I just go back to that we all have a role and responsibility. And for myself, I know that I'm trying to help change that perspective. Perception of what is HR and what HR can be, and who those leaders can be. And I just wanted to build on that piece, Steve, because you were mentioning it. And I know that that is some of people's experience, that they feel like this is what it is. And I try to tell people that, you know, we want to put, you know, hiring and firing is very expensive and it's very time consuming. And so we want to hire right, and we want to make sure that people stay, and we want to develop them. And that's only a portion of HR's work. HR has to work on a variety of other things, like, you know, wanting to develop people. What do those trainings look like? Mental health, like, for example, I'm working on a mental health strategy, you know, and these are projects that we're trying to drive to improve the workplace. And so, it's just to give a bit more breadth, and even health and safety. Like, there's so many elements that go into HR. And so sometimes people don't see that. They may not interact with it. And that's something I was just recently sharing with some colleagues, that yes, I do more than just, this small component of HR. And really everything else that I'm doing is driving and supporting that element. And anyways, just because Steve was raising, I think it was a good point.
Thank you, Sharmila. So actually, one of my questions I was going to ask was, what does HR do to support men? But can you actually do us a favor? Some of the recommendations you made earlier about EAP services, the union, all of those things in terms of when you are struggling at work and there's issues going on, can you please type that in the group chat, and then maybe we can copy and paste it later onto Facebook so that people know what they can do, what their options are. And thank you, because I do believe, there is a preconception, or like what's the word I'm looking for? But in terms of when it comes to HR, sometimes some people feel like HR is really there for the company. I actually read an article the other day where they say that HR there to protect the company, not to actually protect the workers. So thank you, Sharmila, because listening to you, it makes me feel like, okay, so there are some people in HR that are actually wanting to do best for the company, but also for the individuals. They want to retain those individuals. They want to see how they can have these dialogues and fix things in the organization. So therefore, it's not a toxic work environment. Therefore, everybody is getting along with each other and they're doing better. So thank you for that. So Stephen has to go shortly. So before he leaves, I kind of want to ask a question that I believe he will be able to speak to. So I was doing a bit of research and preparing for this, and I just have a little blurb I'm going to read and then ask my question. So according to stats from injuryfacts.nsc.org, the top 3 leading causes of work-related injuries are overextension and bodily reactions, slips, trips, and falls in contact with objects and equipment. This accounts for more than 84% of all non-fatal injuries. These sounds like injury that can happen to anyone, but when I think about this, I'm thinking about men, right? And maybe people in the service industry, like maybe working like PSW job type things, or in the restaurant industry. But so like I said, I suspect a lot of these victims are male. So how does one avoid these common injuries?
Wow, that is a really good question, because I've had a lot of trips and falls and slips and falls also. I've fallen off the back of trucks. I think we have to teach the employee, and it's something that I didn't learn until too late after I fell off a truck, is to take their time a little bit more. But everybody is pushed, and like being in the trucking industry, we were pushed, go, 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 go. You had to get to your next stop, next stop. And I worked for a refrigerated trucking company. So we're doing deliveries at the back. The floors would be slippery. We made changes. After I fell off the truck, there was changes made. But there has to be more training. I was put on the truck, here, go. And where I was not told, watch this part, because of humidity and stuff like that would cause it to be slippery. I think if the companies are going to have people in manufacturing or whatever, they have to train those people proper health and safety standards. And, I was on the health and safety committee for about 11 years. And when we're looking at all the different aspects, and it's evolved over the last, since I went on in 2004, was first time on, it's evolved, but we have to get more training to the employees about how to do things properly, how to be safer. And it's all great. They put it all in writing. We're not all going to sit there and read it. I'm not a reader. I'm a person that has to see and be showed, okay, you got to turn this handle this way or that way. Where there's other people could sit down, like my wife could sit down and learn from a book. I can't. So I think they have to take the people, get them, find out how they learn best, and teach them in that fashion. That, okay, this is the way you handle this particular machine. This is how you, read the signs for the slippery floors, for example. It's they put on slippery, and yet they put a sign of people's lines for people that are illiterate. So and I'm not saying everybody's illiterate, but we have to show people the proper way of doing stuff. And like you're saying about the HR for where I was working, were great at coming up with the policies for the safety part of it. But I think they have to learn more of how to implement them and teach the people as they can learn, like read it or show it, one or the other.
Thank you. Anybody else want to add to that? Steve, you must have seen a lot of injuries in your days in the automotive industry.
So I'll sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No, go on. Okay. Yeah, ironically, this is interesting. I don't think I have, because one of the things that the automotive industry has actually embraced massively is health and safety. Because obviously you've got a lot of heavy equipment, you've got tools, you've got cars, you've got trucks, vans, whatever. And yeah, in the past there were, people who've lost their lives and so on. I mean, there's a bit of a move at the moment because obviously a lot of vehicles are moving towards electric. Now, I didn't realize this, but apparently an electric battery or an electric motor on an electric vehicle, carries something like about 15,000 volts. So if you were to plug the wrong lead in, your history. So there's no easy way of putting that. In the old days of doing something on an engine, if you got it wrong, you might end up cutting yourself or, having a bad injury. But with electric vehicles, it's going to make it even more sort of sinister if you're not careful. And the automotive industry are really, really good at complying with anything that's around health and safety, open pits, making sure they're covered up and so on and so on. And in fact, we're actually using that as an analogy with what we're trying to do, to say, you're going out of your way to look after people's physical health. What are you doing to look after people's mental health? Because every single one of us has mental health. It's the same as physical health, and it can be from mildly annoyed to right the way off the clock at the other end. So yeah, I mean, I've seen injuries and accidents happen, or I've heard about them, but as I say, we don't get too many stories because the industry's complied with what they should be doing for many years.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else want to contribute? Oh yes, Sue-Ann, yes, you were going to say something.
I was just going to quickly say the technology company that I'm currently with does focus on health and safety. And so from a digital perspective, a lot of companies are now adopting software to what Steve and Stephen were saying, where instead of doing all of the manual things, the software now is helping to not only streamline, but to also help train the employees. So whether your employee is remote, the company is now enabling them to have that information at hand so that they can easily respond. So there are technologies out there that is helping with health and safety to avoid what Steve and Stephen was describing. So it's a slow move, but again, companies are moving towards that and ensuring that their male employees and some of their female employees are working in safe environments.
Thank you. I recall, like, sometimes in training, I'm a social worker, but they would teach us how to pick up something properly, or even how to sit properly so that we're not straining our backs and shoulders. Or even, I remember we actually had to use, a fire extinguisher. We had to learn how to use that. So I think it's important that Stephen said, and Sue-Ann kind of backed that up as well, that you physically learn how to do these things and they teach you, but also then, some people are better at learning on the computer or whatever. So it's great. So Stephen, I know your time is almost up. Is there any last words you want to say with us, to say to us, before you leave?
I just want to thank everybody for this morning. It was very enlightening for me. And we just have to make our companies and whoever we're with more inclusive of everybody, not just the men, the women, the new Canadians, which is a word I don't like to use and I shouldn't have used. I prefer immigrants to Canada. But just make everybody inclusive, and we have to make sure that everybody is trained to be safe. That's it. It's the bottom line. We have to make sure that everybody is safe. Everybody goes home tonight, and that's the big thing. Like I said, I've been in the trucking industry 54 years. I've had one major accident where somebody was hurt, and I didn't sleep because of it. But I thought somebody wasn't going to go home. She did, thank God. But we have to make sure everybody goes home, and this is the big thing, and to make everybody healthy and safe. Thank you very much for having me this morning.
Thank you, Stephen, for coming in and sharing your expertise on this subject matter. We really appreciate your time. Thank you. So we're going to actually be wrapping up hopefully in the next 15 minutes. I just got a few more questions on men's mental health, and it's a shame Stephen can't join us for this part, but we'll just, we'll make do. What should a man do if he finds himself at risk of losing his job? What is the best way to cope? What is the best way to seek help?
I'll quickly touch on that. So a couple of years ago, the company that I was working with, there was a big middle management, and myself and others got let go. One of those was a manager that I worked very closely with. He's in the IT side. He actually reached out to me. And in reaching out, he was able to vent his frustrations and some of his anger that he was feeling. And as a result of doing that, I was able to allow him a space where he can just not feel like he was going to be looked down upon. And in doing that, he was able to feel a little bit better and take a step back from the situation and not feel that the decision that was made was unfair. And he was able to move on and find employment immediately. So for me, the key is to find somebody to talk to and not be in the situation that my other colleague was in, where he felt that he didn't have somebody to talk to. Because a lot of the pressures that men are feeling is that responsibility to their loved ones and how they're going to care for their loved ones, and feeling like they are the protectors of their family. And when that is taken away, oftentimes they may be feeling like, what else is there? Because they do identify themselves with their work and the roles that they do. And that drives some of their confidence and their self-esteem. And so when you take that away from them, suddenly, all of a sudden, there's nothing there to replace it. So the key is to have somebody to speak to not hold in that anger and feeling like I'm not worthy. That's key.
Thank you. Anybody else want to add to that?
Yeah, just building on what Suzanne's saying here, because it is true. You're going to have a lot of feelings, a different range of emotion. And so it is key to recognize that there is grief also involved. And we don't talk about grief enough in our society. Grief, we normally are mourning. We normally just associate with the passing of somebody. But when we have different events in our life, like losing a job, losing a friendship, losing a partner, whatever it might be, those are loss. And we need to have help with that. We need skills to help cope with that. And I think that's an acknowledgement of that, and allowing yourself to have those feelings, as Sue-Ann was saying, and to know that you can reach out to your family doctor. And this is totally an acceptable and topic that you should be speaking to your family doctor about, that this is a life event, that's happened to you, because it may impact your health. And that's something the doctor should know about. And they can also provide resources for you as well as to who you could speak to. So that's in terms of the piece around your health and how do you take care of that. And then, of course, there's a piece around how do you get back into the workplace, or if you think you may have been wrongly terminated. And then there's obviously services in the community that you can go to. For example, the Workers Action Center. I've put that into the resource there for you. But there are community supports, and they can help you, figure out what's the next path for you. Do you continue to along with this career, or do you take it as an opportunity to go back and get retraining and to try something new? So, just kind of mentioning those two aspects.
Thank you. Steve?
Yeah, I think for fear of sounding like a motivational speaker, I think the thing for me is this stuff needs to start as part of the education process. And I think, you know, I've got two sons as well. They're 28 and 30 nearly. And, you know, they were very much like me during the education process, taken down a certain route of almost kind of putting their career into a box, you know, and by a certain stage deciding where they want to go and what they want to do. And, you know, I'm 54 and I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. You know, and the reality of it is I've made my way through life, you know, and I think about the other side of it as well. You know, humanity and the world has been here for billions of years. We're on the planet for, you know, somewhere on average between 80 and 100 years. So, you know, it's too short a period of time to spend loads of time fretting over it and worrying about it and so on. But I think what we also do is that we do tend to work from a position of ego, not purpose. And the key thing for me was the minute I worked out what my purpose was, actually, it doesn't matter if I go and end up sweeping a McDonald's car park just to earn money, I can still live my purpose. You know, and I think that's the stuff that I see we don't encourage. And certainly in the education side, and when boys in particular go to sort of college and so on, they're almost sent down a particular route of what society and what things are expected of them. And as an example, I did some work with a university a few years ago around public speaking, and these young students were on a course to learn to be lawyers, and some of them just couldn't hold a conversation. And I would say to them, well, surely you're going to be up in court fairly soon once you qualify and you get out into the big wide world. You're going to come up against some judges that are sort of, you know, my kind of age group, and yet you're struggling to hold a conversation. And they go, well, I didn't really want to do law. It's because my parents wanted me to do it. I actually wanted to do media, or I wanted to be an actor, you know. And you go, well, okay, well, what we're doing there is because we put someone in a box that we end up 25, 30 years later, when that box didn't work, or they end up made redundant, or they end up doing, you know, suddenly going, oh, I've lost my job. That's when we get well, what do I do now? I'm stuck, you know? And so for me, I would encourage any teenager to just go, look, do whatever you can. And it may take you 20 years to work it out, but do whatever you can to work out what your purpose is. Not just, you know, you weren't born to be a job. You weren't born to be a role. You know, become the person that you want to be, and then everything else around you. You know, Menable doesn't work for me, and in 4 months' time, I end up driving a van for Amazon. So what? You know, that's still my purpose. Does that make sense?
No, and you know, it's funny because the next question I was going to ask is, how do you separate your work identity from your home or personal life? And I think you pretty much nailed that question on the head. You said, you know what? Society, your family may have a role that they want you to play, or they may have a career they want you to follow, but at the same time, maybe you feel like you need to be obedient to that, but at the same time, find out who you are. Work on your side hustle, figure out like what that passion, that thing you're very passionate about, start working on it, because one day you may find yourself out of a job and you can now do that full time, or maybe one day you decide, you know what, I've had enough. Like, I do really like this thing, or I'm very good at this thing. I'm going to pursue this instead. So it's finding out who you are, know yourself. So therefore you're not defined by what you do for a living. Thank you. Because I like, for me, that kind of sent chills down my spine, because I feel like I'm kind of on that journey right now. So like, that was perfect. Thank you. Anybody else want to add to that question, or add to what Steve said? No, we're good. Okay. So I do have one more question for everybody, and then we are going to see if anybody in the audience, whether through here on Zoom or on Facebook or YouTube, if they have any questions as well. So, does anyone know what industry has the highest rate of men with mental health problems? It's not a trick question. I'm just asking if anybody knows. No. Steve?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I would guess it's financial services.
Okay. That's a good guess.
I'm going to say it's frontline workers, medical, construction. I think because the demands are so high, and I think in those fields, there is such that willingness to, do good work. And then, when you're seeing so much of it not materializing, I think it causes a lot of burnout and disappointment. That's my assumption.
Okay, Sharmila, what do you think?
I'm not 100% sure, but I do know in corrections, there's a lot of challenges there because of our criminal system and how it's working. And so I've heard from frontline workers, not only the job itself, but working with people within the system, that you've got that double toll. But I'll be interested to see what you say.
Well, according to the research, this is Canadian, sorry, Steve, but it's funny because we hardly find research on Canada. So when I do, I jump on that. So it says, so the information and culture, accommodation and food services, and government services. So you guys pretty much all nailed it on the head, right? And you guys all gave your reasons for why you think it's those industries. They said 53% of employed Canadians with a mental illness, though, are actually women. So do you guys believe this is underreported, or do you think that, men aren't struggling at all, even though I think we kind of know they are based on our conversations today, but do you guys believe this is underreported? Men are struggling to open up and talk about their feelings, their emotions, or do you guys believe, more women are struggling with mental health issues in the workforce?
I have to think it's underreported. As Stephen had said, men aren't really encouraged to talk about what they're going through. So I'm having a hard time believing that it's just women. Women, there's probably different stresses that are impacting women versus men, but at the end of the day, it's still mental stress.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. And I actually think it's still probably underreporting on that stat for the women as well. And I just think as communities, there's so many pressures for individuals, that they are saying that everybody will have at least one episode of mental health crises within their lifetime. And although that's scary, if we start to normalize, mental health like physical health, you may have a broken bone, you may have this, these likelihoods happen. And so how do we prepare ourselves? But certainly I think it's underreporting on both ends.
Mm-hmm. Steve?
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's underreported. I think it's, as we've said before, men are not encouraged to come forward and talk about it, and haven't been traditionally. And I think as a result, and probably as well, if they feel they're under pressure to continue working, not take a break, not have time out, and add to the bit that I was saying before, if they're not working to their purpose necessarily, they're just, plodding, keeping going, keep pumping up the pension plan, and so on and so on. And of course, that's why we have, in the West in particular, we have the concept of the midlife crisis. The 45 to 65-year-old guy who suddenly decides, I've had enough, I've come off the rails, and I'm going to go off and do something that everyone frowns at.
Well, interestingly, I had a conversation with my son, and one of the things that surprised me in the conversation is he said that men are afraid to really do what they truly want to do. As a result, they feel trapped and they just continue doing what they think they're expected to do. That came from my son.
Wow.
How old is your son?
Yeah, he's 23.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is that socialization aspect. And, our cultures and our religions have a role to play in this as well. And how job opportunities or job careers are looked at, and also about what you pursue for your health treatment, and, is this some kind of past life retribution karma that you're having to live out? Is it some sort of a curse that somebody has put on you? Like, there's all these aspects that we don't really speak about that are ingrained in our culture, and our cultures are rich, but they need to evolve as well, because they could actually be preventing people from pursuing the help that they need, from finding their true purpose. And so, what a shame, and what a great opportunity as well for them to play leaders. Like, they help to develop, particularly our religious institutions, you help to develop the values that people grow up with. And so, we're talking a lot about education, and sometimes we talk about that more in terms of the formal education, our degrees, our certificates, diplomas, but there's all this other education that we receive outside of, those walls, and we need to be looking at them as well to be leaders in these fields.
I totally agree. I was actually listening to something on Clubhouse this morning. It was talking about, how are we in our religious institutions? Are we answering people's questions when they are asking hard asked questions? Are we listening to the young people? Because the young people are being turned away from religious institutions because they're not addressing matters that are actually of importance to them. So I do appreciate that. So now there's one more stats I just want to share with everybody. And I know Steve, you have to go. It's actually, it's 1:30. So are you going to jump off right now?
I'm okay. I'm all right for 5 minutes.
Okay, good. So it's about actually in the military. They're saying, so how I mentioned that we asked, do you guys think it's underreported? 53% are saying are women with mental health issues. So in the military, they said there's 2 to 3 times higher mental health problems than the general population. And we know that is a male dominated field, although now there are more females. Can anyone speak to why this might be the case? I can make assumptions, but can anyone speak to why they think this is the case?
Repeat the stat again, Tula.
So they're saying, so remember I mentioned 53% of employed Canadians with mental illness are women, but they're saying that when it comes to the military, the armed forces, they're saying 2 to 3 times more, their self-reporting of mental illness is higher than the general population.
Okay.
When you think about all the cases now of PTSD and post-trauma and all that stresses, I don't think we will ever really truly have a true number, because you have to think about all the different wars we've had around the world where we didn't really have a lot of reporting. And now we're starting to get reporting on PTSD. So what that true number truly is, we're really not going to know. And so we're really at the cusp of the beginning of understanding what that mental health pressure is on men. And what are those ramifications? How are they taking that trauma into their family surroundings, with verbal abuse, emotional abuse, their self-abuse? We don't know the true depth of that, to be honest.
Yeah. What I do know is that we need more support for individuals and families that are in the military. Mm-hmm. And I think we hear that in the news. And obviously I'm not privy to what their practices are, but from what I am aware of what's in the news and what you can read on is that, they have been calling out for more support and services, also because of suicide rates. And so I think what advantage they may have and why the stat is a bit higher that they've been able to report on is because they've had more people on the ground collecting the data, and that they may have had some programs that are starting to make it comfortable for people to come forward. And so if anything, I think this may be a success in one way, because they are able to get people to acknowledge that there's an impact to their health, and that they can feel that the stigma is eliminated or reduced, and that they can come forward and that they can share their stories. And so that's one positive piece that I'm hoping to take away from that stat, is that people are coming forward, and then we can say, you know what, we need more resources here. There is a need. And this is also the challenge when we say, well, we can't provide resources if we don't know the stat. And that's another challenge. Like, well, then how are people going to come forward if they don't feel that they're going to be supported? It's a bit of a cycle, I feel like. But just obviously not being privy to everything, but that's what I would suspect.
Thank you. Steve, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would say, I think the military have led the way in terms of bringing to the fore the issues of PTSD in particular. And of course, you probably couldn't get much more in terms of extreme examples of that. And pretty much, I actually do interact with a lot of ex-servicemen, because a lot of them do end up in the automotive industry. And most of them will always talk about traumatic issues and things that they've seen. And as has been said, the wars that we've had, and even in the last 20 years, mean that pretty much anyone who's been in the military in that time will have seen some sort of service. And so I think the military have led the way in terms of the support, in terms of opening up about it, making it okay to talk about this stuff. Whereas traditionally, actually, you could argue that they were the ones who put a lid on most of the other things. You know, for example, it's only been legal in the UK to be gay and in the military. It's only been legal for 20 years.
Mhm.
You know, prior to that, again, it was all kept under wraps. So, you know, I think there's some learning there. And, you know, what I've learned from my own experience was that actually my issues were as a result of post-traumatic disorder of some sort, nowhere near the level of somebody who'd been in the military, but still traumatic for me because it happened when I was 6 or 7. So, you know, and but that's a subject that we're now talking about. So I think, you know, we've got to almost thank the military for bringing that forward.
That's true. Thank you, guys. So we are going to wrap it up. Do we have any questions from the audience?
No.
Okay. Actually, so I have one. I'm so sorry. You guys are like, okay, stop with your questions. But okay, so you know how our theme for International Men's Day this year is to create a safe environment. Sorry. So what does that mean to you guys in relation to the workplace?
I would say for me, a safe environment is a place where it's okay to be yourself. You know, I mean, you know, there is the aspect of safety in terms of your physical safety, but mental safety as well. It's okay to be you. It's okay to be the person that you genuinely are. You know, it's okay to speak out about your issues, your concerns, your anxieties, your worries, and to know that you're not going to be ridiculed. You're going to be supported. You're not going to be judged. No assumptions will be made. So that's a safe environment for me.
Thank you.
In my workplace, we have a motto, because health and safety is taken very seriously, is that essentially we want people to, when they come to work, we want them to leave the work at the end of the day the same or better than what they came in. And that's what we're striving for. And I think that's, you know, I'm so blessed to be in a workplace where that's, you know, the model and the culture that we want to create supports. And I really hope that that's a model that can be, you know, used and replicated and multiplied in other workplaces across Canada.
That's fantastic. Sue-Ann, what does that mean to you?
Safe for me is accepting each other as we are. And as Steve said, not judging each other and allowing each other to bring our talents to the table.
Wonderful. I believe that is a good way to wrap up this talk, Men at Work. You know, and I do believe that I think I learned a lot. I gained a lot of knowledge, and I hope you guys did as well. But I do appreciate the depth of knowledge that you guys brought to this roundtable discussion. And thank you guys so much for spending your time with me and Voice of Men this morning or afternoon in your case, Steve. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been great. Thank you.
Thank you, Tulu. Thank you, Sivan.
Everybody.
Take care.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm just going to wrap it up with just a few announcements. So like I mentioned, we are Voice of Men 360, and I just want to let you know that weekly we do have 4 live shows. We have Open Up, which is talking about your personal life journey. That takes place every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We also have a weekly webinar, which is what this is the time slot normally from 10:30 or so to 11:30. And so, but we did a roundtable discussion today. Every Saturday, sorry. We also have Vili, which is sharing your personal life journey, but that's a Tamil live talk show. And that's Wednesdays at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we also have it Sundays at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for people who live outside of Canada. And we also have a once a month panel discussion that's in English and Tamil. So we do also have podcasts Open Up in English, which you can just tune in and listen to it at your own convenience, and Vili as well, which is I in Tamil. And we recently started a monthly men's group meeting. It's every third Sunday of every month from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. We had one last weekend. It was actually on mental health. We actually had Steve in there talking about his suicide survivor journey. So that's actually where I got a chance to know more about his journey. And so that is every third Sunday of every month from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. The next one will be Sunday, March 20th from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so also we are going to be having next week International Women's Day celebration. And the topic is the importance of voice. Do men's life matter? And so this is going to be March 6th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we just want to let you know, so even though we are Voice of Men 360, as you see, I'm a woman. We have two other women here on the panel. We are women that are passionate about men's issues. And the group is about people that are passionate about boys and men's issues. Okay, so there's no limitations to gender or age, nationality, or ethnic group. And people from all walks of life can join us and are free to participate with us in all our shows. And so for further information about us, you can go to our website, www.voiceofmen360.org, or you can go to our Facebook page, Voice of Men 360. We are also on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, we have a YouTube channel, Voice of Men 360. So really, there's no excuse to not connect with us, because we are, every form of social media platform we're on Instagram. You can even call us if you don't have internet, but then I don't know how you'd be hearing me right now. So you can reach us at 437-889-8329. That's 437-889-8329, or email us at info@voiceofmen360.org. So thank you everybody on the panel for coming today. I really hope that you guys, don't feel like this was a waste of time for you, but that we were all enriched by this opportunity to talk about these issues in the workplace. Thank you.
Yeah, great conversation.